Welcome back to my channel. This is K Monta's Art Studio, and join me as I paint this Christmas winter wreath. Grab your sketchbooks and any mediums that you're interested in as we work on this wreath. So before we get to the wreath, I decided to do some sketches and practice different leaf shapes using different mediums. So the first medium I decided to use are the Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2s, and because these are water soluble, I wanted to try things out. So I was able to get things in a dry format first and see how I felt about it. You'll see later on in the video that I do end up using my water brush to see how things look in a wet format. This mini sketchbook is a watercolor book, similar paper to the paper we're going to use from the Master Touch collection watercolor greeting cards. So it was a good idea to practice on this paper. I believe I got this sketchbook from Amazon. I can't remember the brand, but I will try to link that below. So as I go along, I add in different types of leaves. You can see that some of these look like pine leaves, some of them look like eucalyptic leaves, some of these look like holly leaves. So just practicing different things before you get into the final drawing. So as I said, I decided to test things out with my water brush and see if I like the look of things being wet, especially because some of the colors, when they're dry, they appear darker. For example, this color here, it appears darker, and you can see that I left the one leaf because I did like how that color looked as a dry format and not wet. So as you can see, I'm pausing, I'm referencing different images, and sort of just really doing a rough sketch. Like, none of this is finalized, none of it is perfect, but this is definitely practice, and I'm able to almost give my mind some muscle memory while I'm working on these leaves. And you can see here I'm testing out how the Luminance Caran d'Ache color pencils work out. So I wanted to try just the color pencils to see if that would look fine without any water soluble material. So I decided to try a different page because it wasn't working out. Then I dove into the Posca pens. I think the first two leaves were Posca, and I was testing out how do I want the wreath to look. Then I dive into my art crayons, and these are also water soluble. So with the art crayons, some of these are pretty difficult to paint over or use color pencils over them because they're so waxy. So I wanted to see how I liked that look by itself. I was still testing things out. I noticed that I did like the look of this, so I was considering using these art crayons. However, I did wanted to try my Stabilo 3-in-1 pencils. They are similar in texture, similar in style and look, but it's easier to go over with color pencils and any other type of medium. So after I noticed that all the water-soluble materials are dry, I am starting to test things out with color pencil, seeing if it layers properly, if things work and you can create a shadow in any type of way, adding different colors. And what I noticed is that some of the water-soluble colors are a little bit harder to, and this is one of the art crayons, so they're a little bit harder to use color pencils over. Unfortunately, my footage between the practice and the card phase was corrupted, so I had to just transition into the card. So to give you some background, I did sketch out my final look for the card. I went with a watercolor background. As you can see, I scratched all the other materials that I used, and I brought out my watercolor palette and did a base color on all of these, and decided to go in with my Poscas. However, after going in with these, I realized that that wasn't the best decision. Again, testing things out as much as possible before going into the final is really important. So because I noticed that it wasn't the look I was going for, I continued to go for it and see where it took me. And you'll see later on that it does end up working out somewhat. However, I would not recommend adding Poscas as a top layer. I would recommend using that as a under layer. So although I did not originally like how the Poscas were looking, I think I was at the bottom of the U curve, as I mentioned in my last video. Working through that U and allowing yourself to go from the top of the U to the belly and back up to the other side of the U lets you work through that process. So I started to see something come through, and I kept on pushing. So I decided, because it is just watercolor and they were a very light wash, having the Poscas underneath allowed for the luminance pencils to go right over that, and things worked out. I started to see, things come to life, and I kept on pushing and adding in different colors. So it's very important to take a step back from your work, even if it's just for a few seconds, or even if you're just looking at it from a distance, so that you can notice what else you need to add, or what else is missing, or what you need to fix, and making sure that everything seems cohesive. So I also kept in mind the shadow and light in this card. So my intent for this card was to have it look more illustrative and more cartoon-like. It wasn't intended to look like a real wreath. And I think trying to capture that with the Poscas is a good look. However, the texture of the paper was causing some challenges. I think because I didn't use as much water soluble materials, I should have went with a different type of paper, because you can see the texture of the paper coming through. So I just kept on pushing. I really tried to make this work, but sometimes you gotta just take what you're given, and in this situation I could have started over, but I just wanted to see out the final product. So I start to add in different details, getting in some light and shadow, some dimension into the bow, the holly leaves, the wreath itself. And as you can see here, I do bring in the 3-in-1 Stabilo watercolor pencils, and I realized I did not like it, so I stepped back and I grabbed my luminance pencil and adding in different colors that are unexpected to be there, such as this ultramarine blue, helps to give your eye that contrast. I think it was at this point where I started to realize that the painting or the drawing was coming together and I wanted things to pop. So I went back in with the Poscas, and after adding the shadow, I noticed that things were still missing some oomph. So I really tried to add something, and I do blame things on the paper. It just wasn't working with these mediums. So that's another thing you could do while testing your preliminary drawings. Make sure that you try different papers. I was committed in the initial practice to use watercolor paper, and I realized that I hadn't tried different papers such as Bristol or hot press watercolor paper. Anything that may change the look. Definitely test things out before creating the final product. So here I'm starting to add some white and hoping that things would start to look a little bit cohesive. As I got to the end, I called it quits and I felt that it was done. I did like the final piece. It gave a sort of antique gift card, greeting card look, so I did enjoy that. Thanks for watching this video. Please like and subscribe, and if you have any questions, please leave them down below in the comments.